Are you a leader, manager, entrepreneur, business owner, or knowledge worker? Are you leading people or wondering how to be a better leader in your own life and work? If you are, then you can be experimenting better. Welcome to The Experimental Leader, a podcast that takes a look at the ways leaders are experimenting in their own work. Hosted by Melanie Parrish, we dive into real-life conversations about how people might be using a scientist's mindset and experimenting in their work. Shift your leadership into something that works better. Join us on The Experimental Leader today.
Hello, it's so nice to be here with you today. I'm Melanie Parrish, and I am so excited about this year. We've been on hiatus all summer, and this is our welcome back podcast. And it's fun to go into our third season of the podcast. I love doing this podcast. I love being with you. Last year we went live, and this year we are trying a new format. We've asked our guests to read the Experimental Leader book, and I want to hear their thoughts about it, not so much about like, hey, what do they think about the book, but what do they think about the concepts in the book? How do they apply them? How are they applying those same concepts in their work around leadership? So I'm super excited about that. And I just wanted to talk a little bit about what I've been thinking about in my own leadership this summer. I really unplugged. I really tried to get some rest. Running a company or a couple of companies is tiring. And so I really have contemplated this summer a couple of things. One is just the impact of joy on rejuvenation and trying to squeeze those moments of joy for myself. Often they come when I'm swimming in a body of water. So I've been doing some of that. And then the other thought that I had kind of early in the summer was, gosh, I wasn't very happy with the level of conversation I was having in my life. And I have conversation for a living. I ask questions. And so if I'm having this thought, it's really my own darn fault. And so I started to think about what could I do to improve the level of conversations that I was having. And so one of the things I realized is that I could set some intention behind the interactions that I have with people that I'm spending time with. And I could actually ask better questions. I don't have to talk about the weather. I don't have to talk about, things that are, for me, boring, often repeated, often things that don't have intimacy or depth of sharing, a risk-taking element to them. And I could change that just by asking better questions when I'm in a conversation with people. So one of the questions I asked in a group of people this summer was, what identities do you claim? What are 10 identities that you claim? And so I want to leave that with you this week. To think about 10 identities that you claim. So mine might be podcast host, mother, author, wife, caretaker for my father, coach, MCC, content creator, teacher, employer. So I'm curious about yours, and I'd love to hear from you if this is something that's meaningful for you. We had all sorts of interesting conversations after we did this about, like, is your identity what you do or what you are, or and we realized, you do the first 10 and then there's like 5 others that are on its heels. So for me, Unitarian would be on there, queer would be on there, and you're sort of we realized we were influenced by who we were with as we were starting to say these identities. So I really challenge you to have some conversations about this with people around you and also with yourself. What identities do you claim? And then the other thing that happened about this whole idea of having deeper conversations is that I started hanging out with all my scientist husbands' colleagues. And for the last weekend, I've had these amazing conversations with scientists. And I can't keep up in the conversations, but the ideas that they're sharing, the innovations that they're doing, the idea that you could program analog was what I was left with from a conversation I had last night with someone. Those things leave me, my brain feeling expanded and stretched and curious. And if you can expand analog, it makes way for all of the things that can be expanded and recreated from the ground up. So I'm sort of fascinated with this idea at the moment of how do we rethink things from the ground up? If something's not working or isn't working as well as we want it to, how do we recreate it? And I'm also super excited about our guest today. Our guest today, I want to welcome Kimberly Wiefling. She helps people achieve what seems to be impossible, but is merely difficult. She's the author of Scrappy Project Management and a whole bunch of other books. And her latest book, Turning Ideas into Impact, is an anthology with 15 other Silicon Valley consultants. She's a physicist by education. She worked at HP for 10 years and then 3 years in Silicon Valley startups. And she's worked with 50 plus Japanese companies and with people from 50 different companies. Her superpower is turning managers into leaders and groups into true teams who can achieve impossible together. She's described as a force of nature and is determined to use that force to make a significant positive impact on our world. Kimberly, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. Wow. Every time I hear my introduction, I just think, I hope I can live up to that.
Oh, yeah, I'm sure you can. I'm super excited to get to have you here today. And you were kind enough to sort of look at the introduction of the experimental leader. And I noticed even when we were first getting to know each other before this, that you were sort of using the experimental language, which I always appreciate. And I think, we're talking about the introduction today, and the format for our year is going to be that we're going to cover one chapter a month. So we're going to start in September covering the introduction, which is a little short. So we're not going to spend a ton of time today, but we're going to cover it just a little bit with some key concepts. And then I'm going to talk with guests each week about one chapter of the book all the way through till June. So if you want to get a copy of the book, there'll be a way to do that. You can also find it on all the, places you buy books. It's easy to find. And I'm just super excited about this. And we were sort of exploring what some of the concepts were. And I think one of the things I was most curious to hear your thoughts on, Kimberly, was, sort of this idea. I remember when I was first doing kind of book podcast tour, whatever, people were like, do you think leadership can be learned? And so I wanted to get your take on that question. I think it's a great question.
Well, I know it can be because I have deeply studied the research. And boy, people get so tired of hearing me say, according to the data, according to the research. But I am a master's degree physicist by education, so I can't break that habit. But the Leadership Challenge, Barry Posner and Jim Kouzes studied for the last 30 years the practices of the best leaders on planet Earth. Over 100 countries, millions of data points, and they found out that people admire and willingly follow certain kinds of leaders, that they are honest, forward-looking, inspiring, and competent, among other things. And they have 5 practices with 30 behaviors in total, that if you just do those behaviors more frequently, people will think you're a better leader. It's not rocket science, and you don't even have to feel like a great leader. You just do these things, and I'll tell you one of the 30 things so you see how easy it is. appreciates people. Oh, I think we can do that.
Yeah.
And the least common practice of all the 30 behaviors they found is ask people for feedback on how I impact them and their work.
Ah,
Eh.
I love it. I love that. I think that's really interesting. Well, and I think that you're so wise. I mean, first to look at the data because that's clever of you. And so many times, I think people start on a leadership journey and then they start reading books. I know it happened to me. You know, you read the book on servant leadership, and then all of a sudden you're making your team lunch, or you read the book on this kind of leadership, or you have some, you know, for me, it was the bossy guy who told everybody what to do. And somehow I was supposed to emulate that as a leader. That's what I thought I had to do as a leader. And all of those things are not good leadership. And so I think trying to figure out a path to leadership is super important. And those behaviors, if we don't know what the behaviors are, we're going to do something. And if we have some behaviors to try that are positive, then we're filling our time with positive behaviors.
Right on. You know, you get the book, you write down the 5 practices and the 30 behaviors, you hang it above your toilet, or you'll see it at least once a day, or wherever else you're sure to see it. And then you just pick one every day, every 30 days, and you can become a better leader. Things like develops cooperative relationships. Okay, let's pick one day and do that. Or asks, what can we learn? I bet that's one of your favorite behaviors.
Yes.
Oh, here's another one. You're going to love this one. Experiments and takes risks.
Yes. I think that's right. And safe to fail experiments would be how I would couch that. You don't want to experiment beyond what is safe to fail.
Well, I call it taking necessary risks, experimenting, prototyping, and learning from mistakes, and then failing forward. Of course, you don't want to launch the Hubble telescope into outer space without making sure it's working properly. Oh, whoops, we did that. Sorry. Yikes.
Yeah. You need to calculate your risks, but
right.
But I think also if you're working on mitigating risk, you may not be, you know, you're spending your time on worthy work. Also, we don't have to you know spend a ton of time here. I'm curious what you're up to in your life and your leadership right now, Kimberly.
Wow. So I spent the last week with 24 people from like a dozen different countries who work for a global Japanese company. And we all met in Hattersheim, a little town outside of Frankfurt, Germany. And I still stayed there because I needed a little rest after that. And it was intense. One of the people in the participants had to be virtual the whole time because he tested positive for COVID. So we're carrying around the phone, we're carrying around the laptop, the iPad, and the people, the participants were awesome. They're carrying him everywhere. I looked out of my hotel room one morning and I see the whole team is sitting around having breakfast and he's there on an iPad having breakfast with them.
Well, that's amazing.
Amazing. And we had the COVID test every day. So, of course, it's a stress fest to say, I wonder when the whole facilitation team is going to come down with it. Then we have to be shouting. But we went outside. We stayed outside in the park. And we mostly were out in a park the whole week. And the people were looking at us, you know, waving to us, asking, is this a yoga class? And we're like, no, it's a global leadership transformational workshop.
Yeah, and I don't know if you can speak to this, and we didn't plan this ahead, but what were they hoping would happen from your facilitation?
Oh, so I have worked with this company since 2007, and this is the 20th time we have done this program.
Wow.
It's basically 15 days over 7 months. And in the old days, before the pandemic, it was 5 days in Frankfurt for kickoff, 5 days in Houston, 3 months later, and 5 days in Tokyo, 3 months after that, to present their impossible projects to their executives to say, here's how we, in the middle of this company, here's how we envision the fabulous future, and to help lead from below so the executives can get a feeling for what's going on in the minds and the dreams of their people. And so this is the 20th time. It's hybrid this time. Last time was fully virtual, which was really hard. And we're never going back to always in person, because the final presentation, when it was virtual, we had over 80 executives and managers. We never had such a big crowd when it was live in Tokyo. So they are hoping they will turn people into the kind of leaders people admire, willingly follow, that they will become a true global team that care about each other, trust each other, that even maybe love each other. I know that's a weird word to use in the business world, and that they will transform this company to be a truly global company from Japan, not a Japanese company.
And what are the leadership skills? What are the leadership attributes that they value? What are they looking for?
Well, I'm not sure they knew, because I asked that question long ago. Please tell me, why do you want to hire us, and who exactly are the stakeholders, and what exactly is success through the eyes of key stakeholders and the measures of success? And they were like, I don't know. So I reached out to choose proven models of leadership, such as Posner-Kouz's Leadership Challenge. And that is what we use for the leadership. And then for teams, of course, there's the 5 dysfunctions of a team. I like that model. Of course, everyone always says, really, there's only 5 dysfunctions? And then for organizational culture, they want them to understand the roots, the DNA, and then the values in action, and then aspirational shared goals of the future. And then just really basic, scrappy project management, which incorporates design thinking, creativity, and innovation. So it is really about becoming the leader of the future that can lead from any chair without position or title, by behavior, by communication.
I think leadership is not a position. And I think that it's interesting to hold that. I think it's interesting to foster that. I think it's interesting how drawn we are to people who have that, and then to break it down into skill and to ponder, how you help people get it. Because I'm a course creator, I want to know how to help people achieve it, get it, change it, fix it, acquire it. So I'm fascinated by all of these ideas, and I have a team coaching certification. So figuring out the model that you use for how to create team, or how do you be functional when you move people together, is interesting.
So we use adult experiential education approach, a la Knowles, Knowles, just reading a book about chocolate and studying the chemical formula of chocolate, you still won't know what chocolate tastes like. You gotta eat the chocolate. So what we do is we say, here's a little theory or model. Hey, yeah, in theory, I should be able to lose 2 kilograms by eating less and exercising more. Trust me, I've been trying to do that for 15 years. But go into the learning laboratory. If you want to go into the learning laboratory, you do exercises, activities, even games. And then you say, oh my gosh, I say I value win-win, but when Kimberly asked me to play rock, paper, scissors, I try to beat my opponent when we could have both done better by cooperating. Where's this happening at work? I wonder if I might be doing this at work, and where I might be able to change my behaviors and apply this insight to my real work. And then you go through this, forming, storming, norming phase, 5 days together, working really hard. Oh my gosh, at least almost a dozen people cried during the week, including one big 6-foot-tall production manager guy from Texas. And I'm just saying, are you okay? He says, Kimberly, get away from me. I haven't cried this much since I was in high school. That's emotional, Melanie. I was not prepared for the level of emotion that we had coming out this week.
Do you think the emotion is different post, as we come out
Yes,
of COVID? Because
I
I
do.
do. I think people are different.
I think we are so craving human connection, and I have never seen this kind of emotionalness in any of our previous programs. We did change a little bit something that might have contributed to that. We had this wonderful gentleman join our team called Patrick Cowden, and he created the Beyond check-in and check-out. So every day, my buddy Patrick, he has to do this little check-in and a check-out. But the first day, he spends time really connecting them. And here's this big, tall guy who was a software engineer for 20 years doing touchy-feely crap, Melanie. And he has them look into each other's eyes and say, hey, friend, how are you really?
Oh.
And then they listen generously to each other and then appreciate. And then he goes through a sequence like this, truly powerful. And I think that also contributed to the deeper connection that we observed.
How are you really?
Yeah. Then he asked them, what do you need now, really? And they start to share. I hate it when someone asks me, how are you? I'm like, really? Seriously? Have you watched the news? What do you want me to say? Fine. I hate that question.
Yeah. Yeah. We all crave human connection, and we all conversationally are running away from it all the time. Oh, I'm fine. Oh, I'll be okay. What if you're not? Like, what if you just be who you are?
Melanie, if you're fine, you just ain't paying attention to what's happening on planet Earth.
Well, you might be fine at any given moment, but you don't say it that way. You don't say, "Oh, I'm fine. Don't worry about me."
I love, like you said, I want an authentic conversation. I want a heart connection.
Me too. I want to know. I want to, I want to roll up my sleeves and be there. I have a friend who's dying. I want to sit there and talk about real things. I don't want to pretend it's okay.
Yeah. And you know what? If you don't let people bring the stuff that they're dealing with from their life into the conversation, they can't show up fully. They're just a mask. I want the full person to show up. So it's like, hey, look, let's talk about it. You don't have to tell me anything that's going to trigger your PTSD, whatever. Just share what's going on for you so we can support. And you should have seen the hugging. I mean, Japanese people, little Japanese guy hugging this big old production guy, and they're both crying. And I'm just like, I got to go upstairs because I'm going to cry too. I'm supposed to facilitate this. And then
That's
people, telling about their struggles with cancer and what's going on with their kids, or they're going through divorce and their kids are alienated. Oh my gosh, people are dealing with a lot of stuff. And if you think you can separate work life from personal life, that's just not realistic. You're a coactive coach and you do CTI kind of coaching, so right? The whole human comes to work.
Cries. It's not good till everybody's crying. Just kidding. Oh, that's not true all the time. It's the beginning of September. To me, that's, there's the January year, there's the beginning of September year. What are you dreaming up in your world for this year?
Yes. So I've been doing this work. I started off in 1995 with the intention, crazy intention. Someone asked me, what's your big crazy dream? And I said, transform planet Earth for the better, create community everywhere. And I read that. I still have that sign. And I'm like, what was I thinking? Now here I am 20 some years later saying, I ain't going to finish it before I die. So I'm really keen to build a community of people committed to being the highest and best versions of ourselves, helping other people become the highest and best versions of themselves, and creating a community that's for the greater good, for the benefit of all, for planet Earth. And I don't want to have it just be me, of course. I want it to continue sustainably, regeneratively.
I love that. And I love the idea that when you can't reach it by yourself, that you invite others to join the dream. I think that's really interesting. I think, and I think that's the ultimate leadership that, if we can, for me, if I can teach people how to develop people as leaders, then it's like the ultimate multi-level scheme that if I can develop one leader, then there's no end to the number of leaders that can be developed. It's quite exciting, actually.
I have to close the window. It's raining on my computer. Great.
It's the World Channel calling.
Uh-oh. I thought, what could possibly go wrong? Sitting in the hallway,
In
by an
Germany.
open window in Germany.
I love that you're in Germany in the rain.
I searched for the best hotspot all over for about an hour, and I found it on the third floor in this little nook by this window now that's letting the rain in.
That's fantastic. Where can people find you, Kimberly?
Oh, they can find me. KimberlyWiefling.com describes my work. The hard part is spelling my name properly. Wiefling.com describes my business in general. And SiliconValleyAlliances.com describes the team of wonderful people that I work with, including most of the team I was working with this week. Love to have people reach out if there's any questions or concerns. Yeah, and I wanted to say something about positive intelligence before I leave, because of course we promised.
Sure.
Positive intelligence transformed our community. Earlier this year, Shirzad Shamin from Stanford University offered a grant program for coaches to say, hey, you can take the 7-week positive intelligence program for free if you're a coach. So I got 29 of my friends to do it. So 30 of us, 6 pods of 5. And we went through the program together, and it was such an eye-opening experience. You know how hard it is to get 30 consultants to agree on something?
Impossible. It's absolutely impossible.
I said, people, this is a positive intelligence program. Come on, people, let's show ourselves ready for it. And so we went through the 7 weeks, and now I'm continuing with some thinking partners to continue the practices. And it was truly transformative. And what it turns out that the saboteurs model that they use, they exactly match the dark side of the 9 Enneagram strategies, which I've been using for years in our leadership program. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is a great way to meet the dark side of all of your strengths. And I have a pretty dark side.
Do you want to say more about that?
Yeah, I'm exciting, Enneagram 7, and I am a very productive, get stuff done kind of Enneagram 8, controlling kind of person. And boy, when those things show up as restlessness, where I can't stay focused, or trying to control other people to an extent, to any extent, it's not good for anybody. And then hyperachiever, I didn't realize I was so concerned with my own grandiosity. And so it has made me look at myself in a mirror and see myself more clearly, and have thinking partners that can help reflect back to me what I couldn't see. You can't see the back of your own head,
I think that's interesting. And I think it's interesting. Do you live in Silicon Valley usually?
I do live in Silicon Valley, Redwood City area, and I'm surrounded by evidence of failure and prototypes and experiments and companies that don't exist anymore, like the Silicon Graphics on the back of the Facebook sign, which is now Meta.
Yeah. Well, I think it's really interesting. The idea of grandiosity. I live in Canada, but I'm a dual citizen. I'm American as well. And it's one of the big cultural differences is how people see self-promotion or confidence. So I'm quite confident. Not only am I American, I'm a fairly confident person, and I'm not plagued with a lot of self-doubt, but I've found it culturally difficult. So there's cultural competency around that as well.
Right.
And I find it much more comfortable to talk about myself in the US than I do in Canada.
Oh, my mentor is Dr. Edgar Schein. I'm sure you must have heard that word. That guy's Dr. Edgar Schein is in his 90s. He came from Austria long ago. He taught at MIT for many years, and he's the guy who invented the term organizational culture. I paid him to have lunch with me every month for years, like 2 hours. And I learned so much about how the work I was doing fits into organizational culture model. And he told me, Kimberly, America has a culture, and here's the winning strategy. Look good, be right, and win.
There you go.
Yes.
There you go. Money well spent.
Oh my gosh.
Well, Kimberly, it has been such a pleasure to have you on my show. Thank you so much for being here.
It went by in a flash, Melanie.
I know it always does. It's just so fun. It's such a fun conversation.
It is. It was very good. I really loved the conversation. I have no patience for small talk. Thanks for taking us there.
Yeah, thanks for being here.
I hope that you're enjoying my show. And if you'd like to take a look at my book, The Experimental Leader, Be a New Kind of Boss to Cultivate an Organization of Innovators, I have a special deal for my podcast listeners. Go to book.experimentalleader.com and you can get a digital copy of my book for just $4.95. I hope you love it as much as I loved writing it. And I hope it helps you create your first experiments.
It was such a joy to be here with Kimberly Wiefling. She's such a clear leader in her field. I love how she brings in evidence-based models for leadership. And it's so interesting how she talks about feedback loops, which we talk about in The Experimental Leader. How do you learn about yourself as a leader? How do you take in information and learn? And then how do you figure out how it's impacting others? Because leadership really is, it's a circle. You're learning and you're also leading others or impacting others with your leadership. So you want to hear from them as well about how you're doing. So ask, hey, I've been really curious. I've been trying saying this in meetings. How's that landing for you? So ask specific questions. Don't ask broad like, hey, how do you think I'm doing in my leadership? Leadership can be a little lonely. And so new leaders often find themselves wanting way more feedback than they get naturally. It's one of the things I hear from new leaders is nobody tells me anything. It's like they don't get the feedback that they're used to getting from having a boss at a lower level in an organization. So that part of learning to be a good leader is learning to quiet that voice in yourself. But on a systematic level, you can ask for feedback. So you don't want to overtax your people by asking for feedback too often. It makes you seem needy. And you can regularly ask for feedback and over time actually learn about your own leadership. So you don't want them to have, you don't want to have, be trying to get your ego massaged from feedback. You want to actually be learning about what you can do better. So you want to ask specific questions so you can actually learn. It's been great being here with you today. Come and join us live because you can ask your questions right in the chat. We would love to have you. And we'll be talking about the book all year. So we hope you'll join us and you can send in your questions if you want to. There's a place to ask questions verbally on the website, on the podcast page, melanieparish.com. And I can't wait to see you again next week. Go experiment.
Thank you for joining us on another episode of The Experimental Leader. We hope you have found value in today's episode because we're dedicated to helping you become the experimental leader you want to be. To access the show notes or learn more about working with Melanie, visit melanieparish.com. Go experiment.